Hi everyone, welcome to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT VRC preparation. This is the second part of the session where we have been discussing an RC that was asked in the CAT exam, in the third slot of the CAT exam in the year 2020. I've titled the RC as Following the Economic Crisis, 498 words, 5 questions. Uh, this is, as I said, this is the part two of the session where we discuss the questions. Okay, now for those of you who are watching, who might be watching one of these videos for the first time, I'll briefly explain to you the structure of these sessions of this course. Okay, so now guys, every single session caters to one RC, one reading comprehension, and is in turn split into two parts. The first part of the session is where I explain to you the passage of the RC in detail, and the second part of the session is where I take you through the questions of the RC. Okay, and yeah, so and 40 such sessions make up a course. 40 of these sessions make up a course which is titled as an anthology of RCs, which is directed towards your reading comprehension preparation for the CAT. All right, the current video that you're watching is the second part of this session, which caters to this particular RC. All right, so let's move on to the questions then. Okay, guys, so let's start with the first question. It says, which of the following, if true, which of the following, if true, would be an accurate inference from the first sentence of the passage? Yeah, so we have the question itself has pinpointed the point of reference very precisely, right? The first sentence of the passage, which goes like, I've been following the economic crisis for more than 2 years now. Okay, all right. So we'll keep this in mind, and then let's now assess the options one by one. The first option says the author has witnessed many economic crises by traveling a lot for 2 years. Okay, so there's a lot of things that are wrong with the option. First of all, of course, you know, he has traveled a lot for 2 years is something like this doesn't find any mention in the passage anywhere. Okay, so this is definitely information from outside. Moreover, the author has witnessed many economic crises. Again, this part as well finds no mention in the passage. Nowhere he simply says that I've been following, and in fact, if you look at the passage here, in the sentence he says that I have been following the economic crisis, which is a definite article. So we are talking about a particular of economic crisis here, right? I'll just write that down here. Okay, so it's not like he has been following many economic crises. We cannot like assume that information. Yeah, so even this is piece of information is not mentioned anywhere in the passage, and hence this option can very easily be characterized as an error of inclusion, option A, and we can label this as a capital E here and move on to the next one. Uh, okay, second option says the author's preoccupation with the economic crisis is not less than 2 years old. So this basically means okay, so that means the author has been occupied with the economic crisis for more than 2 years, right? And the sentence says that I've been following the economic crisis for more than 2 years. So yes, this does seem to make sense. However, we do have some reservation with the connotation that the word preoccupation, following the economic crisis, guys, and preoccupation within the economic crisis are there is a slight difference. There is a very nuanced difference, right? Following the economic crisis has no negative connotation to it. However, preoccupation with the economic crisis seems like okay, he's excessively occupied with the economic crisis. So that's the only reservation that we have with this option. Otherwise, this seems to be totally on point, and hence we'll just put this on hold just because of this reservation. I'm going to put this option on hold for now. Uh, we obviously not enough to eliminate it. We can put it on hold and let's move on to the next one. The third option, it says the author is preoccupied with the economic crisis because he's being followed. I don't think there could have been a more funny distortion of what the author has said in the passage. The author doesn't say that that the author is being followed by someone, and in fact, this is just outrightly funny, and it's a very gross distortion of what has been said in the passage. The author being followed is not an idea that has been mentioned anywhere. This is, however, it just the only reason, we're not categorizing this as an EOI is because uh, This is just the option has been created just by rearranging some words here, right? And so it's mainly a case of distortion as opposed to EOI. So this is definitely the incorrect option, and you will definitely eliminate it, but will categorize it as an error of distortion. Option C. Coming to option D, the economic crisis outlasted the author's preoccupation with it. Okay, now see guys, some learners may have gotten confused here, right? Because the way the sentence has been worded here. See, the authors in the first sentence first sentence of the passage basically says that he has been following the economic crisis for more than 2 years. Okay, and D says that the economic crisis outlasted the author's preoccupation of it. That means, which seems to imply that suppose this is if this is the author's if this line represents the author's wait, I'll draw it again, just give me a second. Let's suppose this line represents the author's preoccupation or the period for which the author has been following the economic crisis, then the economic crisis itself outlasted that. Okay, itself outlasted the economic crisis itself outlasted that. That means, so which basically means to say that the author stopped following the economic crisis at some point of time, right? Before it ended, which is not something that the author has implied here. There's definitely not something that the author has implied here. In fact, he implies that what can in fact be inferred from the passages, that maybe the lowest point of the economic crisis happened somewhere in 2008 and the autumn, and the author has, and it probably has been some time since then, and the author has is still following it. Please note that it is present perfect. This is present perfect tense. I have been following. I have been is present perfect tense. I'll write that down for you. So see, this is again present perfect, right? So so that means that it is he's still continuing. He's still he's still following the crisis, right? So that's what present perfect means. So you cannot say that he is he it, that this option seems to imply that he's not following it anymore. He stopped at some point here, so which is incorrect. So you can eliminate this option as well. And yeah, so this will be a factually incorrect option, right? So there will be an error of EOF. EOF is factual error. So we'll put D here, and your correct answer will thus be by elimination option B. Okay, let's move on to the next question now. Okay, guys. So coming to the second question, the STEM says which one of the following, if false, could be seen as supporting the author's claims. Okay. Now this is a type of question where the question setter has really gone to great lengths to confuse the aspirant, because there is so much of inversion here. It says which one of the following, if false, could be seen as supporting the author's claim, right? So the best way to do this would be to first simplify the stem. Okay, see what we are looking for is let's suppose, so I'm going to rewrite the option numbers here once again. So what we're looking for is an option which, when inverted, which when falsified, will support the author's claim, right? So if that means if option A is inverted, okay, I'm going to use this notation here, my raised to -1, and then if it's whether it supports the author's claim or not is basically what you have to check, and this is something that we have to check for each of the options. Okay, that when these options are inverted, whether which of these four will support the author's opinion, author's point of view, as given in the passage, when they are inverted, not directly. Okay, and the correct option will the option that satisfies this condition will be your answer. Okay, so if you, again, you don't need to write this when you're doing this in the exam. Basically, this is just to explain this to you. Okay, I write these connotations down just to help you understand things better. But you can at least have a preconception of what you're looking for before you start reading the option. Okay, you're looking for an option which, when inverted, will be in line with the passage. As simple as that. If you have that preconception, the chances that you'll get confused, the odds that you'll get confused while reading the options will be low. If you don't, the odds will usually be high. Okay, coming to the first option, it says that the economic crisis was not a failure of collective action to rectify economic problems. Okay, so we don't need to assess this. We need to assess the inversion of this. Okay, so the inversion of this will be the economic crisis was a failure. You get rid of the not to invert it, right? Was a failure of collective action to rectify economic problems. So yes, now this is something that in fact can be implied is something that is implied in the last part of the passage, in the last paragraph, where he says that it is the strangest ironies of the story that after decades in which the ideology of the Western world has been individualistic, now we are in a crisis where we are in it together, right? We are all in it together, and in fact, he puts the author puts so much of an emphasis on financial literacy for the major for most of the people who don't know, most of the public, which anyways does not know much about the economic and finance aspects of how the world works, in order to in order to so that in future such crisis could be averted. Now, this is not something that he directly points out, but it is definitely something that is implied here, because he also provides that as the reason. He says that the aftermath of the crisis is going to dominate the economics and politics of our societies for at least a decade to come, and perhaps longer, and hence my need to understand, hence there is a need for me as well as you, that is the reader, to understand the financial and the economic workings of the world, right? So this is something that can be implied from the passage, that, and hence it will support the author's claim. So yeah, if inverted will, so this satisfies, this fits our bill. So we're going to mark small s here for now, because small s weak selection, because, well, you never know, you might just find a better option. So we'll see about that. Coming to the next option, it says that most people are yet to gain any real understanding of the workings of the financial world. So basically, it means that most people so far, yet to gain means so far they don't have, yet to gain means so far they don't have any real understanding, and they might gain later, that's a different point, but they are yet to gain. That means at this point of time, most people don't have any real understanding of the financial uh, of the workings of the financial world. Okay, so but now what will happen is, and then this is something that might have happened in the case of many learners. Once you understood this, many learners, what they may have done is, once they understood this, they figured that, oh yes, this option definitely supports the passage, and they might have just marked this as the correct answer. And they, in the process of going through and assessing the options, they forgot that you're supposed to consider the false version of this. Okay, that is the inverted version of option B. If option B says that most people don't have a real understanding, that means the inverted version of option B says that most people do have an understanding, and thus we can say that it will not support the author's claim, because the author actually believes that most people don't have an understanding, and the inversion of B says that they do have an understanding, and hence this is something that can be very easily eliminated. Okay, so guys, it's very simple. An option that without inversion directly supports the passage has to be eliminated, because when you falsify it, then it will definitely not support the author's claims, right? Anyhow, let's come to the next one. This says the huge gap between science and the arts has steadily narrowed over time. So this is true as per the passage, but this is not what you're supposed to check. What you're supposed to check here is, uh, okay, I've also given you the, by the way, this here, guys, just one second. This here is the point of reference for option B. Many bright literate people have no idea about economic basics. Now, coming back to the third option, uh, he says that option C says the huge gap between science and arts has steadily narrowed. Okay, but this is not what we are supposed to consider. We are supposed to consider the inversion of this. The inversion of option C will be that this gap has broadened, right? Now, the gap the gap between science and arts being broadened is definitely opposite to what the author has said, contrary to what the author has. The author in fact says that, he says it here, but I'm not sure the idea of huge gap between science and arts is as true as it was a century ago. It's certainly true, for instance, that a general reader who wants to become an education in the fundamentals of science will find it easier than ever before, that which means that means it has narrowed, that the gap is not as much as it used to be earlier. Okay, that's what the author feels. And the inversion of this, of option C, would say that it has broadened. So it does not support the author's argument. So again, you can eliminate this, right? Coming to last option, that is option D. The global economic crisis lasted for more than 2 years. Again, please remember, you're not supposed to consider this option directly. You're supposed to first invert the option and then consider it. Okay, the inversion of this will be that the global economic crisis lasted for less than 2 years. Okay, guys, if the author has been following the global economic crisis for 2 years, okay, then definitely it has to be the case that logically, axiomatically, you can say that the crisis cannot be less than 2 years, right? It cannot be that the crisis lasts less than 2 years. It has to be like uh, suppose the crisis lasted less than 2 years, then then in the part where there was no crisis, but what was the author following in that case, right? Like he could not be following an invisible crisis that does not exist, right? So that means that if the author has anyways been following the crisis for 2 years, that means it definitely must have lasted more than 2 years, right? Which is against the inversion of option D. The inversion of option D is that it lasted less than 2 years. You see, again, please remember that you don't have to consider option D directly. You're supposed to consider the inversion of option D. Okay, so again, the inversion of option D, which says that it lasted less than 2 years, does not support the author's claims, and hence your correct answer here will be option A. Okay, I hope you understood this the explanation here. I'll move on to the next question now. Okay, guys, so let's start with the third question. The stem says, according to the passage, the author is likely to be supportive of which one of the following programs? So it's an application question. Okay, so let's go through the options one by one. An educational curriculum that promotes developing financial literacy in the masses. Now, this is something that the author has been extremely emphatic and vocal about in multiple parts of the passage, right? He talks about there being a gap between the financial world and know-how of the public with respect to the financial world, right? The most of the people don't know much about the workings of the economic and financial industry, right? He says it here. The point of reference is here. It seems to me that there is a much bigger gap between the world of finance and that of the general public, and there is no need to narrow, and there is a need to narrow the gap if the financial industry is not to become a blah blah blah. And also, there's one more point of reference here. Here also, he makes the same point again that I'm many bright literate people have no idea about all sorts of economic basics of a type that financial insiders take as elementary facts of how the world works. I'm an outsider to finance and economics, and my hope is that I can talk across that curve. So yeah, so the both of these point of references definitely are evidently show that the author is definitely in favor of would be in favor of this program. So this is something that can be marked as well. In fact, even as a strong selection. Okay, but we'll still be cautious. Let's marking it as small s slash capital S, small section like between small s and capital S, and then so that because we still have to view the other options, S is the other options. Option B says that the complete nationalization of all financial institutions. Now there is a point of reference, in fact, in the passage where the author says that if our laws are not extended to control the new kinds of super powerful, super complex, and potentially super risky investment vehicles, they will one day cause a financial disaster of global systemic proportions, right, represented by this part of the schematic. So that means he is trying to say that yeah, the law needs to be extended to cover to ensure that it regulates these kinds of investment vehicles as well. So, but that but the idea of regulating the new types of investment vehicles to decrease the risk of crisis is a far cry from the extreme idea of complete nationalization of all financial institutions. This is a hyperbole case of this option. The author has not gone so far as to say that there should be a complete nationalization of all financial institutions. So this is a case of extreme distortion. So option B is something that I'll note here. Okay, so then and can be definitely eliminated. Option C says an educational curriculum that promotes economic research. Now, as much as we can probably infer that the author might not oppose this, he will actually probably would like that like the educational that economic uh, discussions or the study of economics should be part of the educational curriculum so that the masses would not turn out to be the way they are these days. But the author has not been has been silent about has not said anything about tampering or changing the educational curriculum itself, and moreover that too with economic research. He's talking about economic and financial literacy. Economic research becomes too narrow, and educational the curriculum is also something the author has not talked about here. So this will be a case of error of inclusion here, and I'll note option C with against error of inclusion, and we'll eliminate this with a capital E. Coming to option D, economic policies that are more sensitively calibrated to the fluctuations of the market. Now, there's another point of reference here, which can be from which to which this option can be related, where the author talks about the sluggishness of the world's governments in not preparing for the great unraveling of autumn 2008, which was the time when the crisis happened. So he does make a point that the governments need to be more sensitive towards such drastic such crisis of drastic proportions. But that's the only point where he has mentioned this, and he has, and it's not this point has not been given enough coverage to allow this option to trump the first option. The first option is something the author has been quite vocal about towards the toward most of the later part of the passage, right? So even though this comes near to the point of to this point of reference, first of all, it is not very as like completely well paraphrased as what the author says in the passage economic because it says, I think it says, as you can see, it says economic policies that are more sensitive. He's talking about calibrating economic policies, and this talks about the government's response, right? So they are not exactly the same thing. They seem, maybe they might be in the similar domain of discussion, but not, they're not the same. Okay. And secondly, there's the author's emphasis on this has been just passing. He has just given a passive emphasis to this idea. His main discussion has been about bridging this gap here. Okay. So yes, we'll eliminate this also, and your correct answer will thus be option A here. So I hope that's clear. Let's move on to the next question. Okay, guys, so let's come to the fourth question. The stem says, which one of the following best captures the main argument of the last paragraph of the passage? Okay, so the last paragraph is here, and the schematic that we had drawn for this paragraph was here, right? These two parts. The first part basically talks about how the author believes that, says that my need to understand the finance world is the same as your need to understand, and this is ironic because after decades in which the ideology of the Western world has been individualistic, now we are in the same boat together, right? So there's the first idea. Second idea is the aftermath of the economic crisis would dominate the economic as well as the politics of our societies, the economics and the politics of our societies for decades to come. Idea one, idea two. That's all he says in the last paragraph, and now we can assess each of these options in the backdrop of these two ideas. Okay, the first option says the aftermath of the crisis will strengthen the central ideology of individualism in the Western world. So guys, the aftermath. This is the part where the author talks about the aftermath of the crisis, right? This line here, I think, yeah. The aftermath of the crisis is going to dominate the economics and politics of our societies. Now, if you note in this part, the author nowhere has he mentioned anything about any kind of ideology, be it individualism or otherwise. So in this part, the author has definitely not said anything about any kind of ideology here, right? So that clearly makes a strong case for eliminating the first option. Another concern with the first option is that in fact, the whole passage nowhere talks about strengthening the ideology of individualism. Like even if you excuse the aftermath part, that's anyways a problem. But it's even the strength. There's no mention of strengthening any central ideology of individualism in the Western world that's been talked about anywhere in the passage. So, anyways, that's kind of a double kill for the first option. Coming to the second one, it says, whoever you are, you would be crazy to think that there is no crisis. So, guys, in this option seems to imply that in the last paragraph, what the author is essentially trying to do is to persuade the reader to believe that there is a crisis. Okay, so which seems to and that seems to make an assumption that the user does not really believe that there is a crisis. This is a option that is just taking you away from what is being talked about. The discussion hasn't at all been about there actually being a crisis or not being a crisis, or the reader not believing that there is a crisis and the author trying to make the reader believe. No, the author has anyways taken it for granted that there is a crisis, and all he's trying to do in the last paragraph is make the user understand the need, the significance of getting acquainted with the financial workings of the world. That's it. The question, nowhere in the passage, the question has been about, it has been about, the discussion has been about making the reader believe that there is a crisis. And nowhere does it imply that the readers don't believe that there is a crisis, right? So this is definitely going tangent. So you can eliminate this option easily. Coming to the next one, in the decades to come, other ideologies will emerge in the aftermath of the crisis. Again, guys, in the last paragraph, the author does talk about ideologies. He says that, but when he talks about ideologies, it's basically that's basically in the first part of the paragraph, right? Where he mentions the irony that the ideology has been an individualistic, but then we are still it's an irony how the crisis has brought us to a point where we are in this together. That's where he talks about the ideology. Nowhere else in the paragraph does he talk about the ideology, and moreover, in fact, nowhere else does he talk about the emergence of any ideology, right? And moreover, again, in the aftermath of the crisis, it's at least the relevant part is the aftermath of the crisis part. Uh, Again, there is no mention of ideology anywhere here. So this is again definitely an option that can be easily eliminated. Coming to the last option, it says the ideology of individualism must be set aside in order to deal with the crisis. Now, the author has said that we have had to. Okay, the author does see. We do have reservations, some reservations with this option as well, because the author doesn't seem to imply a must here. The first reservation we have with respect to this option is the use of these words must be, and the second reservation we have is the use of the words to deal with the crisis. Okay, so this is so let's talk about the first one first. When he talks about the irony here in this part of the passage, that it's an irony that after decades in which the ideology of Western world was mainly individualistic, now we are found in a situation where we are in all of the situation where we are in a where we are in kind of a fix together, right? Not individualistic. We're not in a position where we can take an individualistic stand. He has just mentioned that as an irony. He doesn't say that the ideology of individualism must be set aside. He just says, all he says is that it just happens so. It has just happened that it's very ironical that after this the crisis has put us in a position where we cannot be individualistic. Okay. So the use of must be here is not totally warranted. That's the first reservation that we have against this option. Second, nowhere in the last paragraph does the author talk about how setting aside the ideology would help in dealing with the crisis. In fact, he's not talked much about how to deal with the crisis. The first step that he has taken here is simply to talk about understanding the financial working of the world. Now, dealing with the crisis would probably be the next step, and maybe you can like it's a long shot to an inference. Okay, but and that's something that we need to accept on the face of it, right? We cannot, like, just because we have eliminated three options does not mean that we have to force fit the fourth option to be correct. Nahi ki haan, it has to be correct or something like that. So we do have reservations with this option, but but if you look at the other options, they are totally opposite to the ideas. They are totally contrary to the ideas that the author has presented in the last paragraph. Like see, this talks about ideologies emerging. The author has not said anything about that. This talks about a totally tangent idea. The author, right? This is extremely tangent, and this again talks about some central ideology in the aftermath. So in this case, you'll have to go for the lesser of all levels, which happens to be option D, and that's the reason why we will not mark option D as the correct answer with a strong selection. We'll rather mark it as the answer with O, which is a symbol that we use for hold. So we are getting we will be marking option D as the answer with this mode of answering, O and triple E. That means we eliminated the three. The reason why we are going for option D is not by selecting option D, but because the rest of the options were worse, and because we could eliminate the other options. Okay, and these are some real situations that you might come across in your actual exams, and like you have to be ready for that. Okay. All right. So I hope if you have any further doubts with respect to the question, which there might be, you can put it in the comment section. All right. I'm going to move on to the next one for now. Okay, guys. So let's start with the last question. It basically the stem says that all of the following, if true, could be seen as supporting the arguments in the passage, except. And there are two things that you need to note here before we move on to assessing the options. The first is that you have to take the options to be true for granted. It's an application question, so you anyways have to take the options to be true for granted and then check whether they support the arguments in the passage or not support them. And second is that it's an except scenario. Except scenario means three of the options of the four options will be ones that support the arguments in the passage, and there'll be one option which does not support. Your answer will be the option that does not support. Okay. With that clarity, let's start with discussing the options. The first option says the failure of economic systems does not necessarily mean the failure of their ideologies. So it basically wants us to check the correlation of economic systems with their ideologies, right? So I'm just gonna write that here, it, right? So the first variable is economic systems, and its second is its respective ideologies. Okay, all right. Now the discussion whether it's pertaining to the economic system and its ideology is something that has been carried out in the at this point of reference in the last paragraph, where the author says that one of the strangest ironies of this story is this that after decades in which the ideology of the Western world, right, was personally and economically individualistic. That means economically individualistic. Ideology of the Western world was economically individualistic. That basically means that the economic system of the Western world was based on an ideology of individualism. I think that's valid to note that here, right? The economic that's what he basically says, that after decades in which the ideology of the Western world was economically, we're not concerned with personally here right now, is economically individualistic. Okay, so after that we have suddenly been hit by a crisis, which shows in the starkest terms that whether we like it or not, we are all in this together. Okay, so after decades of this economic system of the Western world, which is based on the ideology of individualism, we have been struck by a crisis which has shown in the starkest terms that whether we like it or not, we are all in this together. That basically means that we are all in this together. That we basically means that we cannot go by the ideology of individualism. We are in this together. Okay, this is so what we have done now is we have basically put whatever the passage says in the format which can help us assess the first option. First option says that the failure of the economic system does not necessarily mean the failure of the ideology. While the passage here has demonstrates that the failure of the economic system of the Western world, which is demonstrated by the crisis, does actually mean that we cannot anymore believe like base our ideology on individualism, right? So basically failure of the economic system has actually led to the failure of the ideology of individualism. So you can see that how option A is totally contrary to what the passage says, and hence this is an option which will not support. And if this is an option that will not support, hence this can in fact be the answer. So I'm going to mark this with a capital S for selections. Capital S is for selection, not for support. Okay, please note that. All right, let's come to the next option now. The second option says the story of the economic crisis is also one about international relations, global financial security, and mass psychology. Now, the point of reference for this option, guys, is here. The author, in fact, does note that yeah, it's an absolutely amazing story which is full of human interest and drama. One who's by ways of mathematics. So basically, there are a lot of domains involved here. There are multiple domains involved, and that's what this option seems to suggest. It also says makes a point on the same line that the story of economic crisis is also one about international relations, global financial security. We do, however, recognize the fact that the domains are not identical, as mentioned in the past. They're not the identical domains like global international relations and then other comment. But again, guys, you need to understand that this is an application question. You do not eliminate an option basis that it basis the notion that it has some content that is from outside the purview of the passage. You need to take this for granted. You need to take this as true, and then assess whether this does support the what has been said in the passage or not. And this the idea that the option conveys that the story of economic crisis is also about these multiple factors does support this idea, which the author has said that that is an amazing story and which has multiple factors involved in it. So it does support it, right? And hence we'll note this as something that does support and hence can thus be eliminated. Okay, I'll write it as second. Next, coming to the next option, which says the difficulty with understanding financial matters is that they have become so arcane. Arcane, guys, basically the word arcane means mysterious or difficult to understand. And the point of reference for this is here. So the author has very clearly pointed out here that if the financial industry is not to be a kind of priesthood administering to its own mysteries and feared by and resented by the rest of us, we need to bridge that gap, right? And he also says that most of the literate people in general have no idea about all sorts of economic basics and something that the other financial insiders take as elementary knowledge, right? So that means it does seem to imply that the difficulty with understanding financial matters is that they have become so mysterious and so difficult and so arcane. So it does. So this would definitely support what the author says here. See, please again note, we are not trying to figure out what is true as per the passage. You have to take the options to be true. That has to be taken for granted, and in light of that, you need to figure out whether that supports the claim that has been made in the passage or not. So if you take this as true, that yes, financial matters, the difficulty with understanding financial matters is they have become so difficult to understand or so mysterious. If you take this to be true, does it support what the passage says here? Yes, it does support, because the passage makes exactly like almost exactly the same point, that like it's just the people who are within the domain of finance who generally understand finance and not the public in general, right? So even this supports your option, your passage, and hence can be very easily, thus can be very easily eliminated. Coming to the last option, which says economic crisis could be averted by changing prevailing ideologies and beliefs. Now, guys, this is the point of reference for this is right here. It says that my need to understand is the same as yours, whoever you are. See, guys, the the author has laid so much of emphasis on the idea that people need to understand the world of finance and economics, the gap that there is between the general public, the general populace, and the workings of the finance and economics world needs to be uh, narrowed, right? Needs to be narrowed, needs to be clear. The reason he has laid so much of emphasis on this is because like it can be inferred that the reason he's laying this emphasis is so that it can help in the long run to avert these kinds of economic crisis in times to come, or at least make the world better equipped to deal with these kinds of economic crisis, right? So yes, option D is something that is we do agree that it is not something that has been directly said, but anyways, you have to assume it to be true, right? So if you assume this to be true, that economic crisis could be avoided by changing prevailing ideologies and beliefs, will it support something that has been said in the passage, that the gaps that between the gaps in understanding of the general populace with the financial and economic world needs to be narrowed, right? So yes, it will support that. So again, you'll note that this will actually support some of the arguments in the passage and hence can also be very easily eliminated. So your correct answer here will be option A. All right. So I hope that's clear. If you still have any doubts, you can put it in the comments. We'll address that. Okay. With that, we're done with the questions. Let's move on to the next part. Okay, guys. So let's start with the vocabulary section. Now, the way we intend to go about this is on the left side, you can see the passage has been provided with certain words and expressions that have been highlighted here. And on the right side, we have the list, the same words and expressions have been listed with their respective meanings, primarily contextual meanings. Okay. And the way you're expected to go about this is pause the video and go through every expression or word in the context, in its context, basically as part of the sentence where it appears, and then check. Then once you've read the word as part of the sentence where it appears, then check the meaning of the word on the right side. Okay, and do the same for repeat the same for every other word that every word that you may have found difficult or challenging to understand. I will not be going through the meaning of each and every word in this list because we anyways intend to have courses dedicated to just vocabulary as part of other playlists. Okay, so yeah, so that's about this section. Pause the video and go through, do the exercise if you found the words challenging, and we're gonna move on to the next one now. All right, coming to the analysis and readings part of the session. Now, starting with the RC analysis, the genre, the first parameter genre of the passage is obviously economics and management. So again, those of you who may have found this, the content of the passage, the ideas discussed, or even the terminology here to be not so easy or maybe a little difficult, you can definitely benefit from reading some more content from this genre. Secondly, readability of the passage. Again, I'm talking about the readability, the difficulty of the readability of the passage, not the whole RC. The difficulty of the RC involves the difficulty in one experiences while reading the passage as well as while solving the questions, while that of the passage involves only the passage. Okay, readability of the passage could be rated as 7.44 by 10. That is like this will be rated considered a passage to be of moderate to difficult level. Like had this gone beyond 8 or beyond 8, would have considered it to be a difficult pass, but even 7.44 is not, it comes in the moderate to a difficult range. Coming to the passage length, 498 words, which for 5 questions, which gives you an index of 99.6 words per question, which is pretty standard for CAT. Then the idle time for solving the passage. Well, for reading the passage, it would be 3 minutes, not more than 3 minutes. Definitely not more than 3 minutes. You might, in fact, want to bring it down to 2.5. And for the questions, to solve the questions, maybe 5 to 7 minutes, 6 to 7 minutes. Okay. So yeah, so overall 9 to 10 minutes, not more than 9 to 10 minutes. All right. Coming to the next part, suggested readings. Suggested readings are basically so are basically a set of articles that I generally look up, which are related, which are at least to some extent related to the article from which the passage has been taken. Okay, so that it will provide you exposure, at least some exposure in the same domain, in the same genre and domain. Okay, so the two articles that we have taken up here are, the first one is Shortcuts and the second is Money Talks. Both of these articles are by the same author who wrote the article from which this passage has been taken, and the links for both can be found in the description. Okay, so with that we are done with the analysis and reading section. Okay, so guys, this brings the fifth session of the economics and management genre, where we solved the fifth RC to an end. The title was Following the Economic Crisis. I do intend to have a live doubt clearing session soon to cater to the doubts pertaining to this. And yeah, so and now post this, we'll be starting the second genre, where again we'll solve 5 RCs, 5 different RCs, and we'll do the same for 8 different genres. Okay, all right. Okay, guys. So with this, we have come to the conclusion of the session. Now, for those of you who have not watched the first part of this particular RC, this particular session, you can click here on this card, and it will take you on this video, and it will take you to the first part where you can go through the passage explainer to understand the passage in detail. And for those of you who want to watch the intro video of the course, you can click on this card here. It will take you to the intro video of the course. And for those and others again, and definitely if you like the session, do share it with others who might find it helpful and useful, and definitely do subscribe to the channel Sluggers Blue for your CAT VRZ preparation. All right, I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.